Hey, how's it going? So today we're going to be building the Vampirella Jose Gonzalez version kit by X Plus. Let's get started. Alright, so starting out with the unboxing, you can see some pieces came off the runners, but luckily they're fine. Starting off with this runner, we have the parts for the hair, the nameplate, which I really like because it's the same color scheme as the Red Sonja kit, so they'll go together. They're both from Dynamite Entertainment, the comic company. Of course, here's the part for the boots. And then here we have the legs and the earrings, and it looks like the back of the head. Now, one thing I like about this is that the clothing, if you could even call it that, is molded separately, so we can paint it first and add it later. However, there will most likely be some seam lines here and here where they connect. So I'm gonna have to handle that once I attach it. But I'm thinking I'd have to hand paint it. It's gonna be less messy. I can fill those seams and then paint over them. I do like that the little bat motif that goes on there is molded separately. Again, making it easier to paint because that is on the torso. Now, I like the way this was designed because it makes it easier to paint the clothes and not to mess it up. But that's the front half of the torso. Here we have the bangs and the bat. I believe this is the one that goes on her finger. That's really nicely detailed. I do like that. Cute little bat guy there. All right, then we have the parts for the face. It's hard to tell if the lines for the iris are in there. I don't see them, but most X Plus kits have the outline of the iris protruding in the eye, making it easier to paint them. I do like how sharp the details on the eyelashes are, though. That's really cool. I do like that. Of course, then we have some of the skulls. One thing I like is these have vampire teeth. I thought that was a cool touch. And there's a whole bunch of them for the base. I mean, there's like a ton. I believe this is the collar piece as well. Then we have the hands. Thought it was a little weird that the thumb is molded separately on this hand, but I guess it does make it easier to avoid breakage. And then here's that little protruding part that the bat is going to attach to. Then we have the parts for the arms and the back. I do like how well defined the muscles are, the detail, it's very nice. You know, the kind of dimples for the lower back. I feel like they did a really good job with that. And she's got her bands, her little gold arm bands. And then finally we have the main base piece. So we got like a torso there, a skeleton, some stones and rocks, and then of course another skull. Looks like another portion of a skull as well. But this isn't a super involved kit. It's not tons and tons of parts. Not nearly as intricate as the Red Sonja kit, but this will be a nice build. It'll be fairly simple, but I'm thinking it's going to look really good. I really like that it's got so much detail on it. I like that the clothes are molded separately. That's also why I didn't get the other Vampirella kit. Also, I thought that the cartoony look of it was a little too cartoony. Her cheekbones were a little too muscular for me. It looked a little off. But I do like this Jose Gonzalez style kit. So now that we've got the unboxing done, let's get started building it. Alright, so our sub-assemblies have been primed and they're ready to go. But first I'd like to discuss why we do sub-assemblies and why I chose these ones, okay? Now first off, all of the red parts are primed with Citadel Mephiston Red, black parts with Citadel Black, or Chaos Black, and white parts with Citadel White Scar. All three are primers. Now, here's an example of what I mean. I had to build the head separate from the hair, and it's removable. I did not glue it down, but I have it attached already to show you as an example. Now, the back of the hair plugs in here, right? And then the front piece is going to go through this hole in there, if I can get it to show. So because of that, because the bangs plug into that, the head has to be attached before we can apply the bangs. But if we apply the bangs before the head, we won't be able to fit the head in there. So because of that, they have to be separate. You see, we do sub-assemblies so that we can access areas that are either difficult to reach or impossible to reach after assembly. So I didn't put the collar on here, but here's an example, right? Let's say I had glued this all together before priming or painting, right? Well, some of these areas of the hair are going to be really difficult to get to because the body will be in the way. So because of that, at least for the head, the hair, and the two sets of bangs are separate, and we will be painting them separately before we glue them. Now, the arms have been assembled first because another reason we do sub-assemblies is to avoid seam lines. Now, the parts where the arm joins with the shoulder would have a nasty line where they attach, and we want this to look like a nice seamless statue, not like an action figure. Okay, and so because of that, I cemented the arm together, sand all that down, then I glued the arm on, sanded all that down, and then primed it. Because of that, we have a seamless transition between the body and the shoulder. Now, one thing you'll notice I didn't attach was the other hand. And here's why. This hand goes over the clothing. And since we're painting the clothing separately, there's no way to attach the hand first, because if we did that, then we wouldn't be able to get the clothes on there. Now, another thing you'll notice, there's no seam line on this hand. Here's why. This bracelet goes over it, you see? So it hides that. So that line, or this, would meet this here. You see how I'm going to have that line there? That covers that up, so we don't need to worry about attaching this first. However, the peg was too large for me to fit into the arm after the fact, so little by little, I sanded it down, test fitted it, sanded it down, test fitted it, until I could make sure that I could slide the hand in there after I put the clothing on. Another example of a sub-assembly is why we are able to do the legs separately. You see, I'm not gonna put the back piece on right now, but you see how when I attach the legs, that seam line isn't really a seam line, it's just where the clothing ends and the skin begins. Because of that, we have no seam line, and those can be assembled after the fact. Granted, you can cement them on first if you really want to, but you don't have to, and it's going to make it easier to access everything. All right. Now, another example of a sub-assembly is the boots, right? Because let's say, I believe this is the right one. Yes. Let's say we, glue this together first, or cement, or whatever. It's still, we're going to have to be very careful to avoid getting black onto the skin and the skin color onto the black. So because of that, it's just a little less of a headache, a little less extra touching up and backtracking by just having those separate. Now the parts of the base, I just did all in the Chaos Black, even the skulls, just for, the ease of, having this go a little quicker. They are removable. I did not glue them down yet, so I will be painting them separately. However, if I can get that bad boy back on there. There we go. Oops. Get on there, you. Okay, now the nameplate I did in white, and here's why. The back of the lettering is supposed to be white, same with the inside. And so it's easier to have that white ready to go so that I can paint the red over it and avoid the white spots, and paint the gray around the border and avoid the white spots, than it is to paint the white spots, paint the red spots, paint the gray spots, and it's just going to make it a lot easier to detail and paint without having too many issues. Okay, and those are our sub-assemblies. Of course, I did the bat separately as well. But that's just an example of why we do sub-assemblies and why I chose these ones for this kit. But again, it's for the ease of painting, so we can access areas that would otherwise be hard to reach or impossible to reach for painting, and to remove seam lines on parts that would have them if we attach them after painting. So again, if I attached the arms after I painted them, we'd have to remove the paint and sand everything down in order to remove that seam line, and then we'd have to start over and repaint everything. All right, now that we have that out of the way, let's get started with painting the kit. All right, so first we're going to start with the skin, since that's the majority of the surface area. And we're going to start with one of those damp dry brushes I'm always talking about. I'm going to take this flat brush here, submerge it in my water, dab it off on the towel. Then I'm going to take some of that paint on my wet palette, still having a little bit of that water on there. And I'm going to take that, and I'm going to very carefully dry brush over the surface. Now, when you look at this, you can see there's teeny tiny brush strokes. That's okay, because it's so thin it's not going to show. But you see this line here, that thick one right there? We want to take that and move it around. If it's a thick line, then it's going to show. But if we thin that out, I do it by brushing in the same direction as the stroke that's too thick. We can start to move it around, and this paint will be so thin that we won't have any brush strokes when we're done. Now, occasionally your brush will get a little too dry and you'll have to dampen it up again, and that's okay. This will take several coats, but once we're done, here's the start, right? Here's our first coat. Well, once we're done, we're going to have something along the lines of this. And we're doing this with Rakarth Flesh. If you don't cover the primer entirely, if you can see a tiny bit through, that's okay, because this isn't our skin tone. This is the color that's going to go under our skin tone. So you can see it's nice and smooth, it's painted on, it looks good. And I'm doing that for all of the skin parts. And then after that, we'll move on to the next color. So after I finish this up, we'll come back and we'll get started on our main skin color. And now that that's done, we're going to do the same thing with our Kislev Flesh. Again, it'll take several coats, but we will come back once we've finished with this color. Alright, now before we move on to the gold parts, we're going to take a nice dollop of Nuln Oil, and we're going to paint in the details for the eyeballs. That was a little too thick. So I'll wipe my brush off, clean that up a bit. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just so we can see those eyeballs in there. Okay. Alright. Now granted, once these dry, we will have to touch up. Now, you know what, come to think of it, I'm also going to put some Nuln Oil on the eyelids. We'll use that as a eyeshadow. And then I'm going to wash that off. And we're going to take our Reichman Flesh shade, and we're going to put that around the molded in bracelet, and this will help us to make sure we stay in the lines when we paint the molded in bracelet. So this gold part will have to be painted a little bit later, once this dries. There we go, and there's our outline. While that's drying, we are going to take some Liberator gold, and we will paint in all the gold parts. Again, we'll have to wait for that part to dry first. We're going to paint this piece here. We are going to paint the earrings. And we'll do the same thing for the separate bracelet. Okay, while everything's drying, I'm going to take a toothpick and paint on the nail polish. Now, one thing I want to mention, if you don't feel like forking up the money for Mephiston Red or White Scar spray, those two colors are available in paint pots. Now, Chaos Black is not. They have other various blacks, but they are not quite the same. So it won't, like if you have to touch it up, whatever black you use isn't going to match, and you'll have to repaint the entirety of the black piece. However, if you need to touch up Mephiston Red, it matches the primer. And the same with the White Scar. So the only paint, the only primer that you absolutely will need is the Chaos Black. Like I said, the other two are available in pots. But for this, we're using Khorne Red. So if I can get this guy to focus. There we go. Now off camera, I have super glued the boots to the legs and the legs to the body. I did not glue the clothes on just because I didn't think it was necessary. But see, this is what I mean. We're gonna have to stick some putty in there. This side isn't so bad, but I'm gonna use the base to prop this up. Just to hold it together while I do this. I'm gonna take this green stuff. I believe this one's by Army Painter. And I'm going to take, if I could find my X-Acto knife, 1 part green to, or 1 part yellow to 1 part blue. If I can find the outside of it, there we go. And we're gonna blend these together and we're gonna use this to fill in those gaps. I only need a little bit. Now for this part, I do suggest you wear gloves because it's very sticky and it helps to have water on your fingers as well, or on the gloves. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to start on. We knead it together until it's a good dark green. So we're just going to keep kneading at it until it's where we need it to be. And now that we have our dark green, we only need a little bit. So I'm going to pull off a tiny bit at a time. This is probably too much even. Not this should be good. Let's try it. And I do like to wet these rubber molding tools that I have to help me mold it into place. Now once this is on, it's going to have to dry for probably a good 48 hours. No, this is still too big. So we're going to do a teeny tiny amount. Teeny tiny. Which is very difficult to do while wearing gloves. So you know what? I'm going to have to take these off. I didn't want to have to touch the kit with it, but I'm going to have to take them off. Alright. Roll it up there as much as we can. We're going to use this little guy right here. Okay. Now watch. We're going to stick it in the groove like so. It's still too much. Let's remove that. And then look at that. Right in there. Right in that groove. Okay, if I could just get the rest of it off of there, that'd be nice. Yeah, I may have to wet my hands in order to do that. See, I've already kind of gotten a little bit off on the skin there, so I'll have to clean that up. But honestly, I think we are okay right there. Yeah, probably gonna have to add a tiny bit more, honestly. Let me wet this up real quick. My water there. Just kind of scrub that little extra bit off of there. If it stays on there, oh well. I mean, if I can get it flat enough, I can paint it, so it's not an issue. But you can kind of see it's not, there's still a little bit of indentation there. So I'm actually going to take a little more, roll that up. Whoops, where'd it go? Oh, right there. We're going to use that on top of that. We're going to do a little bit more. Let's see here. There we go. Whoops, dropped it again. Okay. Get that a little bit above the skin there so I don't have any issues. I'm going to push that on in. And then, again, we'll remove what we can away from that. See, that top half is good. That bottom half, not so much. But you know what? I'm going to leave that as is and then use my Vallejo plastic putty over that for that tiniest bit of depth that we need there. But again, I'm going to try to remove as much of this as possible. I might have to sand this down after. I might. But that's okay. We can sand it down after and then repaint that one part. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And then I'm going to let it dry for, whoops, got a little bit right there. I'm going to let it dry for, if I can get that, 48 hours. There we go. I need a tiny bit of touch-up paint right there, but not bad at all. And so as you can see, that gap is filled. There's still a little bit of an indentation, but we're going to work with that. So we'll let this dry for 48 hours and then come back to it. And while we are waiting for the putty to dry, we're going to continue on. Now for the eyes, first off camera, I wasn't happy with the eyeshadow, so I just ever so carefully went back over it with Kislev Flesh once it dried and removed it. Now I'm going to do my usual gray Seer for the eyes instead of a white. I just feel like this shade of light gray works really well. I want to make sure my paint is thin enough but not too thin. And then we're going to go in. Right? Not enough paint on there. Let's try that again. Okay, that should work. I'm gonna go in there. Oof. Came out a little tiny bit messy. That's okay, we can easily touch that up in the next step. Which is something we need to do anyway, regardless. Okay. There we go. Perfect. That one may need a second coat. You know what? I'm going to try that now. Oh, it's nice and wet. Okie dokie. And there's the eyeballs. Once it dries, I am going to be doing another Nuln Oil wash. And then we'll move on to the eyelashes. But while we've got this here, you know what? Let's do our outline for the lips. I have this color, alright, this Carberg Crimson Wash, okay? And we're going to do like an outline and I don't even know how to word it. Not necessarily just an outline, but an interior wash as well. We're going to take that Carberg Crimson, wipe a bit of it off, and we are going to paint over the lips entirely. Just so we can get an idea as to where those lines need to be. And we will be touching this up regardless. And you know what? While all that's drying, I'm going to take Corvus Black and start on the eyelashes. I like to do these upside down sometimes because it's easier to access certain areas. And normally I would paint the eyeballs upside down, but since she's looking down instead of forward, that would be a little tricky. So for the irises themselves, that will be done face up. So you can see there already we've got a good start on those eyelashes. All right, let's get the other one there. Okay. I don't know if you've noticed, but I use this trick for my hands for stability. No one has perfect steady hands, so what I'll do is I'll take the hand with the brush and I'll rest it on something to give me more stability. See, I got two fingers on here like this. Makes it easier to keep the rest of my hand stable, which definitely makes it easier to not make mistakes. Now while all that's doing its thing, we're going to do just a regular old dry brush of Mechanicus Standard Gray on the base. I did glue down the skulls at this point, so no water on this, just get most of it off of that brush there. Okay. We're going to go over the stones with it. You can see it's starting to show through already. Yeah. Sorry, my garage door's open so I can hear the neighbors, and so you can too. Next, we will paint in the dirt with Rhinox hide. For our final base color, we will use Ushabti bone to paint in the skulls. And the reason we do it in this order is to make it easier to paint. Because you might be thinking, well, hold on a minute there, Al. If we were going to have to touch up the rocks, why did we paint the dirt second? And the answer is simple. If we painted the dirt on first and then dry brush the rocks, we would get the stones, sorry, we would get the stone color dry brushed all over the dirt. But if we dry brush the base first and then do the dirt and then do a dry brush of the dirt color, we are blending the dirt into the stones. Now the reason that's important is because the whole point of blending that in is to make sure it looks like that dirt is spreading and there's a slight dusting of the dirt on the stones. Because you're not going to have stones all over the dirt, you're going to have the dirt all over the stones. Now while that's drying, we're going to come back to our face and start touching up things like the lips. After touching up the lips and the eyebrow, I decided that that Caribou Crimson would be my lip color. So I touched it up around and added a little more here and there to get it to where I wanted it. And now we are going to do our second shade of the eyelids. This time I'm using a much smaller brush there. And we are going to do another, try to get as much off as I can, another wash inside of the eyeballs. Just enough to solidify that outline. Now, when you paint the skulls, it's probably a good idea to try to avoid the edges of the skulls where they meet the dirt, because if you don't, there'll be a bit of cleanup. Some solid chunks of white are going to be a little difficult to dry brush onto and hide. So it's easier to avoid the edges of the skulls and ribs than it is to go back and clean up over and over again. Okay. Now we're going to start with this Rhinox hide. I get the wet paper towel out of the way. And just like last time, we're going to do a regular old dry brush. But this time, you know what? I'm going to use a smaller brush as well. Give me a little more control. Use this guy. He's damaged up enough. Dip it in our Rhinox hide. Get that worked into the bristles really good. Wipe most of that off and see how this goes. So we're going to start in the rocky areas. And you see how, let's see if I can show it, how this dirt color is kind of starting to very subtly blend in. Yeah, that's showing that that little bit of dirt is also on the rocks, not just around it, because, I mean, obviously dirt isn't only going to be on, you know, or sorry, stones. It's not only going to be in one spot. It's going to kind of spread. Let's wipe more of that off again. So again, you can kind of see right here how that starts gray right there, and then we do a little of that dry brush in there, and it starts to slowly blend that dirt into the stones. I'll do that a little bit. Doesn't have to be a ton. It can be subtle if you'd like. Honestly, subtle is kind of the name of the game. Just build it up as much as you like until you're happy with it. And we'll do the same thing against the skulls. Normally, I would do a highlight on these. In this case, I am not. Instead, to bring out the decals, I'm taking, or sorry, bring out the details, I'm taking my Nuln Oil and I'm going to do a wash over the skulls with it. And that'll bring out all the nice details in it, while also keeping with the dark color scheme. Okay, now for the irises, I'm going to try Khorne Red. Give her these kind of dark red vampire eyes, right? Oof. Again, being left-handed is not the easiest. Okay, that could work to an extent, but what we're going to have to do is make them larger, because otherwise it's too round. Okay, so to an extent, that's our start. Now I'm gonna let that dry, and then I'll do a pupil on the inside of those and then clean them up. In the end, I decided not to do the pupils and just do a white dot on the left side of either eye. You can see her kind of looking down there. Now, while all that's drying and doing its thing, real quick, we're going to take some Mechanicus Standard Gray, and we are going to dry brush it onto the bat. Find a good brush for that real quick. We'll use this guy. And we're just going to do a regular old dry brush, dabbing it off on our paper towel here. Make sure enough of it is off. There's still a little too much. And we're going to brush that all over the bat there. And that's really going to be our only color on the bat. But after this, we're just waiting for that putty to dry so we can attach everything. And then we will do this same exact style of dry brush on the hair. And when we're done, and once that putty's dry and sanded and the Mephiston Red's touched up, we will glue the rest of the kit together and it will be done. Now I did do the nameplate. What I did was I painted around the sides with Corvus Black and then dry brushed with Mechanicus Standard Gray, and then just went over the top with Mephiston Red, just keeping it as parallel to the pieces I could. Very easy to do, very minimal cleanup, and it came out great. So when we come back, we're going to have the rest attached and painted, and we will be doing our final showcase.